And Jeremy, you are an early-stage VC fund for hardware startups that has invested in multiple drone-related companies. What's changed in the last half year?
Everything has changed. I mean, I was talking to the CEO of one of our portfolio companies, Swift Navigation, who does components for drones. He said a year ago they had a couple dozen customers that were drone companies. Today, it's in the hundreds.
Today, it's in the hundreds. Not only have you invested in drone startups, but these companies are also coming to you, seeking you out for advice. What kind of advice do they want to hear?
You know, honestly, there's a lot of concerns about the regulatory framework. One thing that's radically changed in the past year has been the export controls in the United States to other countries. They've really loosened them up so countries can be started in San Francisco and have their first customers in Europe, Mexico, or even a place like Canada.
So their biggest growth markets are not in the U.S., but actually outside.
Absolutely. You know, we have a portfolio company, Airware, and they actually have their own fund as well where they invest in drone startups, and their first two investments were actually in Europe.
Huh, interesting. There's a lot of noise here and a lot of hype, obviously. So I wonder, how do you strip out the noise and determine what part of the hype is valid?
You know, I think drones are kind of where social, local, mobile was about 2 years ago. The reality is there's a lot of people who are like pitching us startups who maybe don't have an aerospace background and don't understand the real dangers of this. I've screened probably 5 or 6 different startups just trying to do delivery in crowded urban cities with no real appreciation for the difficulty or the danger that they might face.
So these are people who are just jumping on the bandwagon and know that if they use the word drone in their pitch, they'll get some kind of audience.
Absolutely. I mean, these are people who, have a technical background. Maybe they bought a DJI Phantom, they've played with it, and suddenly they see the opportunity. One thing, my background, I spent 5 years in the Air Force. To do real systems that are business grade, that are going to last for a while, you need to take a ground-up approach of understanding what kind of durability you need.
So we're hearing that regulatory clarity is going to be coming to us in about, what, a year and a half, 2 years. When it does come, will the money flow ease up? In other words, is all the smart money being deployed now, and we'll see that slow down when we get clarity?
We see this in 3 stages. First, we have our platforms and our components, and we've got investments in those spaces. But what really excites me right now is actually the applications of drones. We just made an investment in a company called InView that's using drones and aircraft to do observation of energy infrastructure. And I think we're just on the cusp there. And once we have regulatory clarity, we're really going to see an explosion of companies using drones to do amazing things.
What clarity do you want? What do you need to hear the most from the FAA when it does come out with some kind of guidelines?
The first draft guidelines that they issued late last year were a huge step forward. We understand what the line-of-sight rules are going to be, what the weight requirements are going to be, and what kind of training the pilots will need. Kind of the next layer that everyone's really waiting for are going to be the non-line-of-sight rules. And, we're big advocates of, kind of risk-based regulation. So this is if a farmer or energy infrastructure in a place like Alaska wants to use drones way outside line of sight, I think that's going to be your first applications.
Okay, I want to bring this back to most people who might not have had much experience with drones, but certainly know Amazon and have seen the commercials related to drones. Amazon has been running a television ad on its Prime service. The delivery guy is singing and dancing. There's little drones buzzing around him. How close are we to drones actually delivering our Amazon packages?
I think we're a pretty far way away. I mean, Enrique Iglesias actually uses a drone in his performance, and actually a couple weeks ago really cut up his hands pretty bad just being by it. I think we're at least 24, maybe 36 months away before we start seeing any drones kind of near people, especially in crowded urban environments.
Right. Okay. So that's still a whiles away. I want to end with some numbers here because the FAA told Congress that final regulations would come by mid-2016, and there's all kinds of estimates on how much in jobs this would create. 70,000 jobs, according to one trade group, with an economic impact of $13.6 billion within 3 years after the rules are initially set. What kind of jobs will these be?
I think you're going to see a lot of different jobs. So one thing that, one big reason that drones are possible is connectivity. Much how a number of years ago, JetBlue famously used people who were stay-at-home moms as call center operators. I actually think we're only 24 months away from seeing people who can be anywhere in the world and actually flying drones in real time. Good paying jobs and give you the flexibility to work where and when you want.
Huh. So not the traditional jobs. Would these be full-time jobs with quality salaries, or are we talking part-time jobs where you start to question whether these are contributing to our labor market?
I think they're going to be full-time jobs with salaries, and that's because you still need quality people. These are people who are going to be trained. They're going to be regulated by the FAA, and then also beyond the actual pilots themselves, the kind of greater ecosystem. I mean, what's interesting about our portfolio company InView is they're actually largely data scientists. So there's going to be some people who have to do the drones and have to understand aerospace, but kind of the back end of data analysis and actually using that information in those drones to do useful things will create a lot of jobs.
So how do you learn about that? How do you learn about becoming an expert in drones?
Honestly, what we see is a lot of people from traditional aerospace background. As I said, I spent a number of years in the Air Force, and there's a number of people shifting into the startup ecosystem, actually from the military. These are people who maybe got trained as a drone operator, or maybe actually just worked with them in Iraq or Afghanistan, come back and see there's this whole ecosystem developing around something that they know more about than anyone in the world.
I'm all for our military vets getting jobs with the drone industry. Thank you so much. Jeremy Conrad, founding partners of Lemnos Labs, joining us from San Francisco.